Thank you for taking my call. Before we continue, could you say the first and third digits of your security PIN? Oh, I didn't catch that. Sorry. That's the second and fourth, please. Okay, lovely. All gone through. Did you see what I did there?
It's a scam. Never reveal your full security PIN, even if you think it's your bank calling. Learn how to protect yourself from fraud.
It is, of course, Talk Radio.
The Independent Republic of Mike Graham on Talk Radio.
And let's say a very good morning to Mr. Peter Hitchens. Peter, how are you?
Well, still at liberty.
Well, still at liberty, just about. There is a kind of, I mean, I like to try and theme the shows that I do, and today's theme, it seems to me, is one of kind of rather unqualified indifference. I feel, as I walk around the streets of this great city of ours, that people have just kind of been worn down to the point where they don't care anymore what happens.
Well, I think some of them have been, and probably the kind of people that you and I run into and talk to in many cases have been, but there's still, I think, a great deal of belief in these measures. People, I think you'll find a lot more people have stayed at home from work this morning than would have done this time last week.
Yeah.
A lot more people will be wearing face coverings on public transport and in other places, and in shops. And I'm afraid that the whole takeover of the national mind by the COVID panic continues to be a major political force and one on which both political parties can rely. And the reason why the opposition in name only, as it's been dubbed, the Labour Party, feels happy in voting for the measures, which will, of course, secure their safe passage, is that they reckon that at the moment it's much safer for them to do so. And they're obviously free to say, right, we'll abstain and let the Conservative Party tear itself to pieces in public. But in that case, they're afraid of being blamed by the voters who think that such measures are actually necessary and justified. I'm sorry, I wish it were otherwise, but I do think that still very large numbers of people continue to be persuaded that the response of the government to this problem is proportionate and right. And although there is a growing weariness among a minority, it remains a minority, and we should be aware of that.
Yes, I think that's possibly true. I mean, I kind of meant not so much that people were not for it or against it, but just kind of resigned to it. Either way, you know?
But in what way are they resigned to it? Are they resigned to it in such a way they say, well, right, okay, we've had enough of this. I'm not bothering with face coverings. I'm going to go to work anyway. I'm going to carry on having Christmas, whatever they say. I should continue to make holiday plans as normal. I shall live my life as if the world had not been taken over by lunatics. Well, some people will do that, but most will still abide by these rules. And the biggest public expression of allegiance to the government and its rules is, as I say, the wearing of face coverings. And it continues to be common in the most absurd places, in the open air, where hardly anybody maintains that it's useful and nobody insists on it. Yet people do it. And as long as that goes on, I think the what you might call the hypnotism of the mass population can still be assumed to be in place. And as long as that goes on, we're stuck. This is not just a continuing crisis, it's a permanent crisis. I heard someone say, as I swam up through the waves of sleep this morning on the radio, that it looks as if some sorts of restrictions on travel would persist for the foreseeable future. Yeah. And I've been for a long time fearing that's true. I love travelling, but I love travelling to be free. The feeling of being somewhere else and being free is what I largely do it for. And the idea of doing it so I can be bossed around by other people's police officers and COVID marshals doesn't appeal to me in the slightest. So this makes my heart sink. But I have a feeling that 5 years from now, it'll still be impossible even to go to France without having something jammed up your nose on the way out and on the way back. I just find it so repulsive. I can't be bothered to travel.
No, I take your point, and I feel exactly the same way. The reason I haven't gone anywhere, really, apart from the Isle of Wight, for the last 2 years, is because I didn't want to do all of those things. And I didn't want to sit on a plane wearing a mask, and I didn't want to sit in an airport wearing a mask, for hours on end. And then I thought finally I'd broken through and I was going to go to the States, but now I'm not because they just made it too complicated. And I guess at some point or other you have to, obviously there are some reasons why you have to travel to see family and stuff. But I'm like you, it's no fun for me. It's not fun. In the same way that if I had to go to a restaurant and wear a mask every time I walked anywhere, I wouldn't bother going. But I don't do that.
That's the point. Yeah, exactly. And you go to restaurants to enjoy yourself, not to be told what to wear.
Right. No, exactly.
I haven't been told what to wear since I left school.
No, quite. And you, of course, wrote this weekend about the sort of the creeping, unfortunate nature of the things that we've given up, and the fact that you don't think a lot of them are coming back.
No, I don't think they are. I think we have become, and it's one of the results of the cultural revolution we've been through. We have become a very conformist country. People are much, much happier if they're fitting in with everybody else, if they're saying the same things, wearing the same things, telling the same jokes, laughing at the same jokes, and holding the same opinions. And you see all this in these ridiculous events in Durham University, where the far from rising up and saying, "Oh, don't be ridiculous." I mean, we may not like Rod Liddle. I don't like Rod Liddle. We don't like Rod Liddle, but it's perfectly reasonable for a college head to describe his students as pathetic if they walk out. You may not even agree with his description of them as pathetic, but it's a reasonable thing to do. And now the poor man's virtually in hiding. And not merely are all the student organisations demanding his head, but he's not getting any backing from the other academics. Right. Because in general, as I say, conformism rules. And it's not, the thing is, because it's not ultra-violent, and people are actually screaming and smashing things, people don't recognise it for what it is, but it has many similarities with Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution in China in the 1960s, when any kind of non-conformist was pulled down. But because it's being done in a more peaceful and how should I put it, moderated manner, people don't realise how important it is, and also because it's everywhere, and it encompasses everything, every aspect of life. People don't realise how big it is. It's as if we were ants, which can only see small things and not big ones. Yeah. I can say till the cows come home and long afterwards that we are facing a great attack on our national liberty, and nobody believes me. They think I'm shouting and making it up. Just when this whole thing began, I said, this is dangerous, accepting these restrictions. Yeah. How are we ever going to get rid of them? And here we are. It'll be the second anniversary before we know where we are, and it's still going on. And people can talk all kinds of gabble about statistics, which will leave most people believing that we are still in the midst of a major medical crisis. And one thing I have to say, before you rightly come back and reply, the use of this word overwhelm. Yes. We're told over and over again that the NHS is going to be overwhelmed. Well, tell me something. Has the NHS ever been overwhelmed? What is the objective definition of overwhelm? Can somebody tell me what they mean when they say the NHS will be overwhelmed? Because in my experience, the NHS is overwhelmed the whole time. Yes. It's such a badly run organisation that despite the huge efforts of its many skilled and entirely charming medical staff, it simply cannot cope with the problems it's supposed to deal with. What is the technical definition of overwhelm? When will we know it's happened? When will we know that the danger of it happening is past? There's no answer to this. And as long as these vague words are used, we're in this permanent crisis, a permanent state of siege. Yes. Well, as I said earlier today, if they actually took the time to fix the NHS properly so that it did work, so that it did have capacity, so that it did have an opportunity to understand that every Christmas and every winter they might need more capacity than they do in the summer, then that would be what you would expect them to do. If you were running a company, if you were running a warehouse which got a big delivery every single December and there wasn't enough room for it, and you did it every year, year after year, year after year, surely at some point somebody would say, maybe you should get a bigger warehouse. Yes, I know. It is. It's not difficult, is it? But again, I think every time anybody says the NHS is going to be overwhelmed, they should be asked, if only we still had journalists, they should be asked, what do you mean by overwhelmed? Define overwhelmed. Yeah. Tell us at what point this will have happened or not have happened. When will the danger have passed? It's the vagueness of the monster is coming. The monster is coming. The monster is coming. Well, what is this monster like? What is it called? What is it? Where can we see it? All the time. It's like parents trying to frighten children. There's a monster, which is never properly defined, which we're told will come if we don't behave ourselves. And I'm tired. It's right. I mean, and of course, as if by magic, today, having been told by Boris Johnson last night at his pre-recorded, little State of the Union address, he said, we must all go and get ourselves a booster. Book it now. Let's do it, were his words, right? Apparently, the website has now crashed today. So they're now telling people not to book the booster because they can't cope. I wish I'd predicted that. I mean, it is a bit predictable, isn't it? Knowing what we know about all government computer functions. Of course it's crashed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then again, people are rushing off to have these things. So they were, it was, I mean, whatever people's opinions are of the vaccination, and I know there are some people who are very passionately against it, but there's no question at all, but that its implementation was actually quite remarkable, and that it has completely changed the situation. The fear of COVID becoming a serious disease, if you get it, was hugely reduced by it. So why did nothing really change?
Well,
why do we still go into panic mode over figures which I have to say, when I last looked at them, didn't seem to me to be that alarming?
Well, they don't appear to be alarming, but we now apparently are taking fright from something that might happen. And the only reason apparently we're doing this is that last time Boris was criticised for not acting quickly enough. So now apparently he's decided to go completely in the opposite direction. There's a kind of madness to it.
Well, of course, there is another aspect to this, which is, of course, that the more we talk about this, the more we forget about the pseudo-crisis that he was in before about Christmas parties and wallpaper. I don't regard these things as politics myself. I think they're what we resort to in this country because we no longer have any serious discussion about politics. Is searching out for scandals and sleaze and misdeeds by individuals. But it is the fear of those developing which I still think is behind this lurch into a new COVID panic. And yet people will get the wrong end of this too. Instead of saying, why on earth was it that a year ago it was a criminal offence to have a Christmas party, which is a reasonable question, they instead condemn government members for having Christmas parties. It's the wrong thing to get worked up about. The other thing about this, which must be evident to any thinking person, is if they were doing the things which they're accused of doing, then, and we've had so many instances of this, then isn't it fairly plain that they themselves don't believe the propaganda which they're pumping out at us?
Oh, quite.
If they genuinely believe that holding a Christmas party or even holding a Christmas quiz in the office would endanger a single person in that office with this terrible deadly disease which they claim is about to smite us all to the ground, would they do these things? And the answer is no, they wouldn't.
No.
So they don't believe it. They don't believe what they're telling us.
Right.
That's what they should be being confronted.
And do you not think that then should have an effect on the public, as the public
Should
wants
have,
that?
but it doesn't. And it just doesn't. And people are incredibly incredulous and incredibly conformist. And this is a result, I mean, I said it before, of now 60 years of really, really bad education, plus the conformism necessarily spread in populations by electronic media. And there's hardly anybody in our society anymore who knows how to think or how to question. Those of us who've been journalists, we watch these so-called press conferences where people go, where is the person in this room who wants to ask the awkward question? There isn't one.
No.
It's not there.
I mean, there were one or two
the others would just ignore it and carry on as if it hadn't been asked.
There were one or two over the party, but as you say, that's kind of a different...
It's not real politics.
It's a different story. But I mean, when I see the front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning, as it is here, 1 million jabs a day in race to avoid a New Year lockdown. I mean, it's not even news, that, to me. 1 million jabs... I mean, it's like sort of government propaganda, isn't it? And I'm not particularly picky on the Telegraph.
It's fulfill the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
We have to have so many injections. My favourite story about 5-year plan is there was a huge race to produce a certain tonnage of nails in the Soviet Union to fulfil a 5-year plan, and they weren't meeting it. And to meet it, they decided the only thing to do was to make enormous nails, several feet long, because they weighed a lot, and because their target was measured in tons, they were able to meet the tonnage target by producing all these enormous
giant nails
for people, which of course had to be melted down afterwards because they were no use as nails. But they met the target, and this is what happens once you have targets.
Well, that's when you have, that's how they've ruined our educational system, I think, and probably the NHS as well. So there we are, Peter. We're going to take a short break. We'll come back with a couple of other bits and pieces. Peter Hitchens is here, Man on Sunday columnist. It is a joke, all of this, isn't it? Why am I feeling slightly detached today? That's what I want to know. This is Talk Radio.
Smart people
Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham, right here on TalkRADIO. We're talking to Peter Hitchens, Mail on Sunday columnist. Just to go back, Peter, to our original discussion about the Rod Liddle situation. Interesting that, I mean, you highlighted an awful lot of the individuals involved in the protest, but they sort of speak the same way, don't they? They don't talk about free speech. I listened to an interview that one of those guys did with TalkRADIO last week over the weekend, and he said things like, well, you know, this is not an issue of free speech. It's an issue of breaking the rules, and he's upset that that Tim Luckhurst had, in fact, in some way not followed the correct way of organising a dinner, and that they should have said that he was coming. But he also said something fascinating, where we went, you know, yes, you can say whatever you want, but you can't say things that are racist, or you can't say things that are transphobic. So he's basically making that judgment on something that Rod Liddle said. He couldn't name anything that Rod Liddle said that was in fact racist or transphobic.
No, well, but then on the other hand, these things are now matters of judgment of the person who hears them. If somebody hears what you say and they think that what you said is racist, then under the post-McPherson report rules, then it is so. And I wrote an article at the weekend about how people feel perfectly free to call me a fascist. Which is completely false and doesn't bear any relation to any opinion.
And frankly libelous, isn't it?
So, well, it's possibly, but who wants to pursue these things? I just would like people to realise how empty the word is.
Yeah.
But I saw recently walking around Oxford, people beginning to walk around Oxford with T-shirts. You know, there's this expression, no platform for racists.
Yeah.
Well, the T-shirts they were wearing had the words on them, a platform for fascists, and showed a picture of the guillotine standing on a scaffold.
Yeah.
And these people wearing this thing are people who, if you ask them about the death penalty for murder, they say, no, we can't have that. That's uncivilized.
Yeah.
But they're perfectly happy to make a public joke out of the idea of executing their political opponents.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think that the rising generation are that hostile to the idea, first of all, of imprisoning, and secondly, but ultimately, of eliminating the people who disagree with them. Obviously, it's not an issue now, but seeing the gradual change in the political weather in this country, I think it will be an issue within not a very long time of whether it will actually be legal to say some things, which is now, it's now dangerous to say them professionally. You can become unemployed, but you'll keep your liberty. But it will actually become illegal to say certain things, and people will be imprisoned for it. And I don't think that's by any means out of the question in the current and growing political
and seemingly
total absence of opposition.
Yeah, apparently the University of Durham also told students if they wish to put posters or other messages in their windows at the university which were in effect offering to do harm either to Tim Luckhurst or to Rod Liddle, that would be all right. They would not force them to take them down.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
But someone is deciding. There is increasingly an ultimate authority that says this can be said, this cannot be said.
Yeah.
And also, certain types of people can say some things, and other types of people cannot say some things. And this is the basis of a lawless circumstance, which will, I think, exist not all that far down the road from now, where it will be possible to be prosecuted and quite possibly even imprisoned for what you say. And I don't think it's that far away. So many things which have happened over the past 20, 30 years would have seemed unimaginable before it happened. And I warn people not to dismiss this as a fantasy. We are really in danger of a society in which it is the whole idea that someone should be allowed to say something you profoundly disagree with is dying.
Yeah.
And that any idea which you disagree with can automatically be classified as some sort of hate crime whose effect is to damage other people. And that's the way it will be done. They'll say, well, we're not prosecuting you for what you said, we're prosecuting you because what you said has harmed someone.
Has harmed someone, exactly right, which is entirely subjective and impossible really to prosecute in law anyway. Just one final thing. You also wrote about the rather laughable crackdown on middle-class drug taking, which I'm sure is a favourite subject of yours. We've seen it many times before. It's never worked before. Won't work this time.
Well, it never happens. It doesn't work. It doesn't happen. You're old enough to remember Ian Blair's declaration on this. I think Sajid Javid, when he was Home Secretary at one point, made the same thing.
Yeah.
As soon as you hear the word crackdown, you know that nothing will happen. It's just a thing which people... And what the government is doing is it's guarding its conservative flank by pretending to be tough on this issue, while actually, by another form of inaction, de facto decriminalising drug taking on a very large scale. And eventually, I'm sure that in some future, quite possibly allegedly conservative governments will actually legalise some drugs because of the huge tax revenues. It's the so-called sin taxes, particularly tobacco and drink, have brought in enormous amounts of money to the exchequer. And the tobacco tax is of course, now not producing anything like so much. They're very much on the search for something else that will bring in this level of taxation, and they see it in drugs. And I think there's a very strong faction in British conservatism now, which says, okay, let it go. Let's legalise these things and tax them and make lots of money out of them. And what do we care anyway? Because you have supposedly libertarian organisations like the one I call the Adam Spliff Institute, who are perfectly happy with large-scale drug taking anyway, as far as I can see.
Yeah. Oh, I think many organisations are, and I suppose that's wherein lies the rub. But listen, we're out of time, unfortunately, Peter. Thank you very much indeed. Peter Hitchens, Man on Sunday columnist, talking to us there about a great many things, including, of course, the erosion of free speech, the erosion of our liberty, the erosion of all of the things that we used to hold quite dear in this country. And there's no question that the erosion is going on, is it not?